Thank you, Cameron. Can I begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land, the Biripi, and pay my respects to their elders. I'd also like to acknowledge my parliamentary colleague Rob Oakeshock, Peter Besling, the local mayor, and Bill O'Brien, local Indigenous elder. I'm here on behalf of the Minister, Simon Crean, who sends his apologies that he couldn't be here, but it is a pleasure to address you all this morning on what is a very important conference for regional development in this country. And in a big country like Australia, the regions are vital to our nation's economic development and the diversity of our society. One of the great joys of my job being a senator is I get to travel around regional New South Wales and work in particular with local governments to deliver better services for people living in regional communities. And this week I've had a number of trips to regional New South Wales. On Tuesday I was in Mungindi on the far New South Wales northwest border, where half the population of the town live in Queensland and half the population of the town live in New South Wales. Consequently, half of them support the Blues on State of Origin night and the other half support the Maroons. It makes for interesting times come closing time at the local pub, according to the local publican. But I was there to open a community hall with the local mayor, and it was a partnership between the federal government and Moree Shire Council to deliver better services for the people of that region. We then went on to the local school, where I opened a $2.8 million trade training centre. And the smiles on these kids' faces, where 50% of the population of that school are Indigenous, and the opportunities that this trade training centre will open up in hospitality, in metalwork and construction jobs is endless. Money well spent on behalf of the government. On Wednesday I travelled to Singleton and visited Macquarie Generation's solar boosting project at the Liddell Power Station, where they're using the heat of the sun to generate steam to run a turbine and reduce their carbon emissions in that particular power plant. We then travelled down to Newcastle and went to Ausgrid's Smart City, Smart Grid program that they're running there, where they're using technology to work to trial new and innovative ways to reduce particularly households' consumption of electricity and ultimately their electricity bills. Yesterday I was in Orange, where I spent most of the day with the local mayor, John Davies, travelling around opening brand new facilities, an $8 million aquatic centre upgrade, where for the first time they'll be able to offer swimming lessons all year round to kids. And he told me that over the last year the population of Orange has grown by 7%, and the biggest population category now in that community are kids between the ages of 0 and 4. That makes the importance of Learn to Swim and swimming facilities for that community all the more important, and that's a partnership between the federal government and Orange City Council to deliver better facilities for that local community. I also opened 2 Building the Education Revolution facilities, about $4 million worth of investment in better education in our regions. This government understands that when our regions are performing well, our economy performs well, and the Gillard government is really proud of the partnerships that we've developed with regional Australia, and we understand the benefits that strong regional communities bring for our nation's livability and our economy, and that's reflected in the programs that this government has developed to work with regional Australia. At the forefront of that, of course, is the Regional Development Australia Fund, where the government supports projects that will stimulate economic development in important regions throughout the country. And the focus of this program is partnership. It's all about partnership, bringing the community together, bringing leaders like yourselves in the community together to think about the plan for economic development in that region, and importantly, how the federal government can work with you to deliver that plan. And I know, unfortunately, on the Mid-North Coast, you haven't been successful in rounds 1 and 2 of that particular program, but I'm a big believer in the philosophy that if at first you don't succeed, then try again. And that's demonstrated in the outcomes in many regions in respect of that program, because 46 of the unsuccessful applications in the first round were then later successful in round 2. And the government has just announced rounds 3 and 4 will be opening very soon. And round 3 is $50 million worth of investment for small towns with populations less than 30,000. And round 4 will be $175 million devoted to strategic infrastructure in rural and regional areas. The first 2 rounds collectively were worth $350 million. But importantly, and this demonstrates the benefit of this program, they leveraged $1.2 billion worth of economic development in the regions. And that goes back to what I was saying earlier about the partnership and the focus on partnerships. You coming up with the plan, the government providing that extra little bit of stimulus to get the plan off the ground, and then the leverage comes to the community through the economic benefits. And expressions for round 3 and 4 will open very soon. We've also been devoted to ensuring a focus on regional infrastructure, and that comes through our Regional Infrastructure Grants program. And I've always said that you can tell the health and the strength of a particular region by looking at their airport. And if you look at the regional and community infrastructure grants, you'll see that this region is growing. Port Macquarie just received $2.8 million for an upgrade to their airport. Taree, $2 million for an upgrade there. Kempsey, $2 million to upgrade their airport as well. It's a good thermometer on the health of a regional economy. We've also been investing in livability in cities, in providing support for sports, the arts and culture. And Port Macquarie Indoor Sports Stadium that development recently received $2.8 million worth of federal government support. I was pleased to travel to Coffs Harbour earlier in the year to provide $280,000 worth of support for the local surf club, where they've done a magnificent job in refurbishing those facilities and opening that facility up to the community for their use. Of course, roads are very important to the economic development and the connectedness of regional communities. The Kempsey Bypass is a major project occurring in this region, and I was fortunate to drive the first pile on that wonderful infrastructure project. The longest road bridge in the world is being built on that project, about 3 kilometres worth of road bridge. It's a project worth $618 million for this community, 360 direct jobs and about 1,100 indirect jobs. And a large proportion of those are Indigenous apprenticeships and traineeships, which will bring massive benefits for Indigenous trainees in this local community. I've been instrumental in opening a number of upgrades to the Bulahdelah Bypass that's going on at the moment. The Buckets Way, an upgrade is occurring there, $17.6 million worth of federal investment. And there's been upgrades to Taree roads through a number of projects there worth $12.7 million. We understand that boosting local economies, regional economies, improving lifestyle will break down some of those barriers that have traditionally existed between lifestyles in the city and the regions. And when you talk about breaking down that gap between the regions and the cities, there is no more important program that this government is undertaking than the National Broadband Network. The NBN will revolutionise our economy and our society. It will unlock new possibilities and drive the next big productivity leap in our economy. And I think that many of us just aren't aware at the moment about the possibilities of the NBN because, and there's a role for government to play here, and I think we need to accept some of the responsibility for this, we haven't been active in stimulating the digital economy in Australia in the way that other nations have been. And that will be a big focus of the government's work in coming years. Imagine the possibilities of being able to diagnose a sick child for a minor illness through the television by talking to your local GP without having to go into a hospital waiting room or your local GP. Imagine being able to offer a kid from Laurelton who's got an interest in mathematics the ability to take a class in physics, despite the fact that his or her school doesn't offer physics in that particular school because they don't have the resources. Well, this kid will be now able to hook up through the NBN and take his classes through the television, and it's happening already in rural and regional areas. Or imagine the possibility of a farmer being able to meet with his or her customer in China, having a face-to-face meeting as if they were in the boardroom there with them rather than having to get on a plane and fly all the way to China. We are only just beginning to realise the possibilities of the NBN, and unfortunately, I think in some respects our society is beginning to divide into those who get the NBN and those who don't get the NBN. Now clearly, Mid-North Coast RDA does get the NBN because they've just been successful in securing a grant for $25,000 for an NBN Satellite Champions Awareness Project in this region. Coffs Harbour City Council clearly get the NBN. I've got to say I work a lot with Coffs Council and they are the most impressive organisation when it comes to understanding the possibilities of the NBN. Their Switched On Coffs program, where they're working with the local university to create digital hubs, and they're going out in the community encouraging businesses that currently might be existing in Sydney and working in Sydney because they don't have the broadband width to send complex digital files over the internet, and encouraging those businesses to look at relocating to Coffs Harbour once the NBN is rolled out within the next 12 months in that area. Coffs Harbour clearly get what the NBN means. Unfortunately, the Coalition don't get and don't understand what the NBN will mean for our economy. Initially, they said that the private sector should be involved in building the NBN, not the government. Well, we all know, and you know, and this really highlights just how much the Coalition don't understand the notion of regional development. We all know that if the private sector were to build the NBN, it means that the cost of a connection for regional communities and households will be about 3 times that of the cities because of the tyranny of distance. Or you could simply connect to an inferior service, which is traditionally what's been happened. And that's the issue about reducing the gap. Now they're saying that they're interested in looking at fibre to the node rather than fibre to the home. Again, don't understand what's happening in the rest of the world, where the UK, France, Spain, New Zealand are all now moving to develop fibre to the home, faster speeds, more convenience and better connections for people, particularly those living in regions. Malcolm Turnbull, I think, gets the NBN, although his policy pronouncements don't reflect that, because, you see, Malcolm Turnbull is actually quite a big investor in Spain's Telefónica and in France Telecom. And guess what? They're building fibre to the home. A big olé by Malcolm to his party's policy on the NBN. They also don't understand the importance of technology in the notion of economic development. And I don't want to talk again about too much about United States presidents, but in 1961, when John F. Kennedy challenged the US Congress to send a man to the moon by the end of the decade and return him safely, unwittingly, he not only fired the gun on the space race, but he also fired the gun on a productivity revolution, because the United States government would invest heavily in mathematicians and physicists because they needed to develop a way to get a computer small enough to fit in that capsule that would land a person on the moon and get that capsule back up to dock with the main ship. Now that investment by the government led to the development of the microprocessor, which, of course, led to the development of the personal computer, and then led to the development of the smartphone, which we all carry around in our pockets every day. And where would we be without this technology in a modern economy? It was the government's commitment initially to that program that led to the private sector eventually coming into that space when the technology became more cost efficient and effective, that led to the development of those technologies that we all now take for granted, and that the private sector, importantly, is now competing to deliver lower cost and better service for people. It was the United States government's investment in ARPANET that led to the development of the internet. So the claims that the private sector should be investing in this space fail to understand the notion and the importance of the link between technology development and productivity growth and economic growth in our society. And that's something that we're really proud of, and I think in 10 to 20 years' time will be a great symbol of the advancement of our nation and the policy mix being right by this government on the NBN. Of course, social policy and livability are very important to our nation's regions. There's no point in coming to live in a region if you can't get access to good health care or your child can't get access to a good education. And this government has made a priority of investing, particularly in our regions, in better health care by boosting funding for hospitals and training more doctors and nurses. And, of course, in education. Through the Building the Education Revolution, we have rebuilt every single school throughout this country. We have devoted funding to delivering better educational services for kids. And the benefits of that really will begin to flow in 10 to 15 years' time when we see the benefits of the smart boards that are all now in students' classrooms throughout the country because of the Building the Education Revolution. Investment in sports, investment in arts and culture is important for livability as well, and I think it's appropriate that Simon Crean is not only the Minister for Regional Development, but he's also the Minister for Arts. And he has a great focus on promoting arts and culture in our regions through his stewardship of those two very important portfolios. So my message today is the government's focus in our regions is one of partnership, working with local communities, working with local governments to develop plans that will boost economic growth and livability of our regions. And your conference today is devoted to leadership. You are the leaders of your communities in regions throughout New South Wales. We look forward to consulting with you, to developing, identifying opportunities, working on your plans to deliver better economic outcomes for regions and ultimately better livability and sustainability of regional communities. Thank you and good luck for the rest of your conference.